Oh, fucks. Let me turn off my yin yang twins up in this bitch. Just order some Chipotle. The diet's going well, motherfuckers. I didn't even eat all day today, and I didn't even eat yesterday at all, so I'm doing just fine, motherfuckers. But figured I'd do a video while away from my food because it's pretty far away. You know what I'm saying? And the video that we're gonna talk about today has to do with something that I like to call bullshit. You understand me? Otherwise known as cinematic wrestling, right? Cinematic wrestling fucking sucks, man. Now, with that being said, for those of you that may not know what cinematic wrestling is, because we get all sorts of new people here all the time in the Hater channel, subscribe right now. Cinematic wrestling is something akin to, I don't know, the Ultimate Deletion, fucking the Boneyard match, that bullshit Bray Wyatt John Cena segment at WrestleMania. In other words, it's wrestling that is not really wrestling. It's more like a pre-taped movie or something like that, right? This is horrible. Now, let's talk a little bit about the origins of cinematic wrestling as I put my phone to charge up in this bitch. You know what I'm saying? So, let me get my charger. So, cinematic wrestling, I believe, did not even start with Matt Hardy, right? Now, I'm sure some of you are out there thinking, but Hater, you know, cinematic wrestling started in 1983 in Lansing, Michigan at the Biodome or some bullshit like that, right? I don't care about that. I'm talking about mainstream here, you know what I'm saying? Mainstream, like actual mainstream cinematic wrestling that was presented as cinematic wrestling where the term entered the wrestling vernacular, right? So, I believe that the first culprit of this was Lucha Underground. Now, in Lucha Underground, this actually was pretty cool, right? So they would show like videos of Prince Puma, who is actually Ricochet, training with Conan, right? And Conan's doing all these things and has all these movie effects. Then they show like the bad guy who's like the boss of Lucha Underground, and he's having a conversation, and it's like almost like film noir in a way, right? And it's just really added something to it, right? Because it accentuated the storytelling elements of wrestling. And as I always say, wrestling is primarily about the storylines. It's not about the match. However, motherfucks, right? There has to be a match to serve as the payoff for the story. At the end of the day, wrestling is about the matches in terms of how the story should end, right? A story can't just end with Brandy Rhodes on like the psychologist's couch being like, oh, that was all a figment of my imagination. That's fucking stupid. It has to end in a match. Now, with that being said, when the match is more story-driven than the actual story, what do you do to that, right? What can you say about that other than it's complete garbage? So that's what I'm getting at, right? Lucha Underground, even though I believe personally they started this trend, they did an actual good job of setting up the stories with it. Now, I didn't really watch Lucha Underground that intently or anything like that. You know, I typically skip these things because I'm like, I don't give a fuck what like Cobra Kai is gonna do to like Dragon Moon next week. Who gives a shit? You know what I'm saying? But as a style, I thought it was interesting. It was novel. It was unique, right? TNA also kind of dabbled with this, where like the backstage segments were a bit more movie-esque, and they didn't really acknowledge the fact that there's like an interviewer or a camera person in the room. Like people would just act as if like they were in a movie. You know what I mean? Now, this, like anything else that sometimes starts out well, turns into shit. And this thing turned into shit not the first time they did it, because it's a novelty act, right? Like when Matt Hardy did the first deletion thing, what I think it was that the final deletion? I don't know. The first one they did was him versus Jeff, right? That one was all right? But it was all right in the context of what TNA was. Similar to what I said a few weeks ago on my video about how HBK and Undertaker ruined wrestling. You know, their match with all these kickouts and, you know, false finishes was great because it was Undertaker and Shawn Michaels. That's called context, right? Similarly, in the context of TNA has nothing to lose by putting on some garbage, some retarded shit, and they do it, it turns out to be entertaining. That's a positive, right? Now, if you keep relying on this again and again and again, then you fundamentally failed at doing what I want you to do and what countless millions want you to do, which is entertain them. You understand what I'm saying, motherfucks? So now, cinematic wrestling has become more and more prominent, especially with this COVID nonsense, right? It doesn't need to be, but it is nonetheless. You understand what I'm saying? What the fuck is this shit? some sort of whatever. Yeah, it doesn't need to be, but it has become more prominent. Clearly, both AEW and WWE are capable of having matches live, or not live, but at least pre-taping them and having them be traditional, right? You can experiment all you want with stadium stampedes and all that other goofy shit. At least that has like it's a modicum of a match, right? Now, a lot of people liked Stadium Stampede. I thought it was atrocious. And the reasons why I thought it was atrocious was because even though it was a live wrestling match, in presentation, it was still cinematic garbage, right? Like there was that spot where Nick Jackson, I think it's Nick, maybe it's Matt Jackson, I don't know their names, the dark-haired one did like 17 Northern Light suplexes like across the field, That kind of shit is stupid, man. It's dumb, motherfucks. And that's why cinematic wrestling sucks. I mean, that's just one of the reasons. But think about what cinematic wrestling is. It's basically catering to the smarts, right? Wrestling, whether you like it or not, is supposed to be presented as real, right? It's supposed to be presented as a real sport. The idea of wrestling is that if you and your grandma from Latvia, let's say, if you're a Latvian motherfucks, or from Lithuania, you bring your grandma to America, she's never seen wrestling before in her life maybe because she's an old bag, right? You show her WWE, and she's like, oh my God, these people are really hurting each other. That's the reaction that wrestling is supposed to elicit. If grandma from Lithuania comes and watches John Cena and Bray Wyatt, grandma from Lithuania is going to think, what the hell is this retarded shit? Why are these guys that are supposed to be fighting wearing different shirts? You cannot explain it to grandma from Lithuania, right? This is a fundamental principle of what makes sports good and exciting. The least explainable that a sport has to be, the more popular it is worldwide. Think about that, for example. Like the two most popular sports in the world are obviously soccer and I would argue boxing, right? Everyone likes boxing all over the world. Not so much in the US anymore, but all over the world, boxing, right? Because it's simple. The rules of boxing, even though they're relatively complicated in terms of like, scoring and, counter punching and, what is and is not allowed, like the clinch, all these other things, even though it's complicated to a person that's really learning how to box, right? The rules are very simple. It's two guys, they have gloves on, so the gloves signify that they're going to use those gloves to hit each other most likely. Then you turn it on, you see them hitting each other, you're like, oh, it's just two guys hitting each other. That's the sport of boxing, for dummies, right? Soccer, same thing. You see two goals and a goalie and a ball, right? You can clearly see as the game progresses that one team is trying to go left and the other is trying to go right, right? And you see the goal, and when someone shoots, you're like, oh, they're trying to put that ball in the net. Simple as that. Basketball is also simple. So you see it, you're like, oh, okay, I get it. You don't have to be an expert to sit down. Now try explaining football, American football, to a European. Sit down with a European, not like someone from like Germany or England. I'm talking about someone from Latvia, let's say, motherfucks. Someone from Bulgaria who's never seen it. Explain to them what the fuck is going on. They're going to be like, what the fuck? Why are they taking a break? I don't even understand. Like, if a random Bulgarian turns on a football game and it's during like a timeout, they're going to be like, what the hell is this? Someone must have died during the last play or whatever, because why else would they stop the game, right? Wrestling is the same way. You turn on wrestling, you're like, oh, this is supposed to be a fight. Now, quickly, if you're not a retard, you'll realize that it's fake, right? But that's fine. It's supposed to be presented as a fight. When you present it as a movie, you need to do one of two things. Number one, not call it wrestling, and two, do it very well. And none of the cinematic wrestling episodes have been done well. None of them are good. Like, everyone loved the Boneyard match, right? Now, the Boneyard match is probably one of the better ones, right, in the world of cinematic wrestling. But compare it to a movie, right? If you compare it to a movie, you will quickly realize that that cinematic wrestling and the Boneyard match were garbage, right? If you compare that to like any Van Damme movie, right? The action scenes in a Van Damme movie are obviously better because they're produced by people who actually do that kind of shit, and Van Damme is an actor who does that kind of shit. Undertaker and AJ Styles they're actors too, but primarily they're supposed to be in-ring performers. I don't want to see them fighting on top of a barn. If you do it once in a while, fine, right? Like I said, the first time you did it, fine. Scarcity makes something special. If everyone on NXT has been NXT champion, then the title is not special anymore, motherfucks. If every fucking diva, except for Lana, has become a multiple-time women's champion, then what the hell is the prestige of the women's title? Scarcity is what drives wrestling. And nowadays, we're seeing all these cinematic storylines, and the next one is going to be Bray Wyatt, who is reverting back to his old gimmick, right? facing Braun Strowman in a Wyatt swamp match. Like, well, the person who came up with this is obviously missing a chromosome or two. There's no other explanation. I mean, they sat down, they're like, what if we revert Wyatt to his even less interesting character? What the fuck is this, man? Is Bray Wyatt the WWE's version of Matt Hardy, who just switches back and forth between 3 different gimmicks, none of which are interesting? And two of them are basically the same. Whether he's the Fiend or the guy in the swamp, it's the same shit. He says the same shit, he does the same shit, he acts the same way. You know, why are we to believe that this fat fuck is gonna be able to beat Braun Strowman, you know? Oh, he's gonna get in his head. Get the fuck out of here, you know what I'm saying? So that's what I'm getting at, motherfuckers. Cinematic wrestling, you just watch it, and it's only there to cater to 2 groups of people. The very, very few smart people who are also smarks, or the people that are just so stupid that they just think it's cool because Undertaker rose from the dead again. You know what I mean? That's what I'm getting at here, cucks. Wrestling needs to go back to the basics. I'm not saying let's bring back like fucking Frank Gotch. No one's saying do that, because that's boring as shit too, like Daniel Bryan and Drew Gulak and these jobbers. Like, nobody wants these guys either. But wrestling needs to go back. It's such a simple philosophy. You take the best parts and you emulate those. What sold? Charismatic, big guys with 3 moves each. That's what sold. The Rock had 3 moves. Stone Cold had 3 moves. Didn't matter. Nobody gave a fuck. They just go in there. The storyline was great, and that's all that mattered, right? You have a guy with 17 moves, Drew Gulak. None of the moves are good. None of the moves are exciting. He has 0 charisma. There's nothing there at all, right? And you're like, oh, this guy's a big deal now. No, he's not, motherfucks. And same thing with the cinematic wrestling, right? You take Braun Strowman, a boring cuck. He's a fucking cuck. Every picture I see of him, he's either dressed in like a girl's uniform or as like a Santa's elf or doing some other cuck shit. You know, he's a big, strong dude, and I can only hope that the real person that plays Braun Strowman is suffering inside, thinking to himself, why am I allowing these people to make me into a cuck? He's obviously not a pussy. He's like a 6'9" monster who lifts like millions of pounds of weight. I mean, he could be a cuck. I don't know. I don't know anything about him. You know what I'm saying? Maybe he's trying too hard to get close to that Alexa Bliss. You know what I'm saying? But there you go, motherfuckers. That's what I have to say about that. Cinematic wrestling needs to go away. You know, like I was talking to a friend of mine, and he kept saying, he's like, oh, they're gonna have Braun Strowman and Bray Wyatt in a cinematic wrestling match, which I like because I like the Firefly Funhouse match. And I'm like, if you are entertained by Ramblin' Rabbit coming out and telling John Cena that he needs to like embrace the dark side or whatever, I'm sorry, man. You are retarded. If you're entertained by Mercy the Buzzard, I don't even know why I know that name. There's something wrong with you. There's no other explanation. Like, you're an infantile person, right? Who is just basically entertained by childish shit, you know? And that's why wrestling is now confounded and overexposed by people like Joey Ryan, and I hate to say it, it looks like Velveteen Dream, motherfuckers, Velveteen Dream. You know, I hope he didn't do it. I also hope Joey Ryan didn't do it, you know? I don't want people to be rapists. But it will be filled with a bunch of weirdos. There needs to be some sort of vetting going on here. And that vetting, in my opinion, starts with people that are willing to do cinematic wrestling matches. Why the fuck would I want to watch that when I can watch Sons of Anarchy with better actors, right? And a much better storyline, right? What's more interesting, motherfucks? What's more interesting? Season 4 of Sons of Anarchy? Or will Braun Strowman be enticed by Bray Wyatt and the Swamp? What's more interesting, man? Will mind games work on Braun Strowman because Bray Wyatt is bringing him to the Swamp? Is the dumbest shit I've ever heard in my life. That is just lazy storytelling. And with that, motherfucks, I conclude this video, and I conclude simultaneously that cinematic wrestling is fucking retarded, and I fucking hate it, and I hope they never do it again, motherfuckers.